Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for our 31st episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show, where we discuss pertinent topics regarding the food and beverage industry with industry professionals. My guest co-host today is Joey Altman, who wears many hats: celebrity television chef, restaurant owner, author, culinary consultant, and guitar player extraordinaire. Joey started his restaurant career when he was 13 years old, washing dishes in a local diner in New York during the summer. Realizing then that the prep cooks were having more fun than he was, the next year he became a prep cook. And that's when he realized that he was going to become a chef. Joey was classically trained in France, cooked in New Orleans under Emeril Lagasse at Commander's Palace, and then Jeremiah Tower at Stars in San Francisco. And Joey has starred in over 600 television episodes with over 1,000 guest chefs. In 1998, he launched a television cooking show called Bay Chef, which has won numerous James Beard Awards. In 2021, he co-hosted Food Network's Appetite for Adventure, a series where gourmet food meets the great outdoors. And in 2003, he hosted Food Network's Tasting Napa, the back roads and hidden kitchens of California's wine country. Boy, that sounds sexy. He's been a partner in several restaurants, a consultant to the wine industry and to many famous restaurateurs, and has written a book titled Without Reservations: How to Build Bold, Creative, Flavorful Food at Home. In his spare time, Joey plays the guitar along with many of his chef friends. So without further ado, please welcome Joey as our co-host. So I'll begin by asking Joey the first question. Joey, you've had a diverse life experiences from being a prominent chef, a television celebrity, an author, a restaurant consultant, playing guitar in a band, and being a devoted husband and father. How have all these experiences contributed to your successful life?
Wow, that's a big question. I would just say, like anybody else's life, everything that you do, if you're passionate about it, will give you that sense of accomplishment or reward in so many different ways, whether it's personal, professional, or something that you feel gives back to a community that has been so supportive of you. And that's how it's been for me. My career has been one that has not come out of any master plan. Like, I know so many people who, like, they have a plan. This is, they're going to stick to their plan. They're going to work their plan. Here's where I want to go. Step one, step two. I just put myself out there, and this sort of universe kind of shows me, a light to go towards, and if it feels right, I go to it. Like my cooking show, I wasn't looking for it; it came to me, and it turned into something that I wasn't planning on, but then opened up all these other doors. I knew that I always wanted to be in the restaurant business in some form. I love cooking. I love cooking for people. The hospitality part is a huge part of it. So it's not just the culinary aspect of it. It's that whole engagement with the kitchen staff that I work with, the crew. I love that sort of as Anthony Bourdain kind of talked about it in Kitchen Confidential, being one of the pirates on a pirate ship. There's something to that. And then also being in the dining room, watching people consume the food that I make and watching them enjoy that. That sort of what was like the early inspiration for me. Because when I was younger, I was a kind of mischievous and didn't really, my grandmother said I was born without an ass. And it was probably her diagnosis of my ADHD. And so I was constantly trying to, I wanted to be a stuntman. I wanted to be a magician, a musician, trying all these things that were very kind of frenetic in my life. And then when I started cooking, that's when I started getting positive reinforcement, of positive feedback for what I was doing. And so that's kind of how I followed it. But all the things that I've done, whether it be cooking in restaurants, doing the TV show, playing music, they all are part of the formula of being with people that I like, enjoying what I'm doing and some semblance of people enjoying my efforts and getting something out of it as well, not just for myself. So that's the best way I can explain how my diverse career has been rewarding for me.
So when you started washing dishes and you got into that environment of, so much people orientation between customers and the staff, et cetera, at what point did you determine that, wow, this is going to be the way I'm going to play the rest of my life, as far as a career and being involved, immersed in this, this culinary industry? What were the things that went off in your mind that sort of, sets you to make a firm commitment to pursue this, as a professional career?
Well, it definitely wasn't when I was washing dishes. When I was
Yes,
washing
that's
dishes,
how I started too.
I knew that I liked the environment of the restaurant. I didn't like my job particularly. That's why when I saw the prep cooks, what they were getting to do and what their job was versus mine, I was like, I'd rather do that than this. So, but I enjoyed, like, I grew up in a small town. There wasn't a lot of options for high school work. There was, mowing lawns, doing delivering newspapers, and working in restaurants or hotels as a bellhop or something like that, which I also did. But when I was cooking, when I started to learn how to cook, I just really just enjoyed the creative part of it. I enjoyed knives and fire. What could be more fun for a young guy to be messing around with? Plus, I was surrounded by older people who at the time I kind of looked up to or felt at least I wanted to impress upon them that I could do it, because it was definitely a challenge, and it was something that I felt like every day there was like a sense of small accomplishments. So that's always a big motivator when you feel like you're learning and you enjoy what you're doing and you're getting better at it. And so, but it wasn't until really, even after I graduated culinary school, I mean, I loved culinary school. I did really well in it. But when I went to France and I worked in a restaurant in Tarare and I butchered a whole wild boar with this chef, just he and I went to the market, got this whole animal, and we came back and we butchered it together and we broke it all down and then we made some stuff. I had this moment like, this is it. This is so incredible. I just felt so connected to the craft, the spirit of being a chef and being connected to the process of going it to the market and getting real good products. Because when I was cooking before, back in even in culinary school, we would get stuff in boxes or cans, and it wasn't quite canned to the pan, but it was, we were using all dried herbs, and this was back in the early 80s. And so when I saw real product turning into like amazing plates of food, that's when like all these lights went on. And that's when I came back to the States. That's when I was all fired up, looking for restaurants that would sort of mirror that experience. And that's when I went to Boston and worked at the Harvest with Bob Kincaid. And I was very fortunate to get into that kitchen. And there, they were doing, we weren't getting whole animals, but we were getting real product, and we were doing, real cooking with all fresh ingredients, no cans, no dried herbs, no, I mean, we had spices, but we were, it was just as close to what I experienced in outside of Lyon, as since I was in France, like never before in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
That's cool. So how have customers' taste changed from the time you started in the industry to today's customers' taste expectations? What have been the major changes that you've seen?
I would say, I don't think that when you say taste, there's an aesthetic taste and then there's actual flavor taste, right? So
Okay.
I think people haven't really changed as far as like, if you think about salt, sugar, and acid, like from a more kind of scientific thought of how to build a flavor profile. I think, a good sauce or a good vinaigrette or a good soup or, a good pastry 50 years ago still would taste delicious today. And all the same thought needs to be put into making it delicious today as we did 50 years ago. I think what has changed is the presentation, the menu mix, I think people are much more open to a variety of different ideas as far as food combinations. Like when I was at the Harvest, for instance, we did classically French food, but with an American aesthetic. So, we would make a dish where we were using Virginia ham, crab apples from a farm, and we would make a maple chili sauce to go with that. But the process of which we were putting it all together were all based on French techniques, reduction, making a stock, julienne, all that same stuff. Now, I think you can see all these different international techniques, whether it be, tempura from Japan or Chinese stir frying or Indian spices coming into the mix. And people, I think, are much more open to having a much more wider variety of influences on their cooking than they did before. Where before, like to do, Asian in French, you were considered fusion, and that was sort of very iffy back in the day. There were places that were successful at it, but it was still very niche and novel. Now it seems to be much more pervasive, the open borders of how people approach cooking. And I think that the palette has become more expanded as far as what people appreciate. But it all still has to taste good. And, I think also the audience has changed. So America's dining audience, like when you would go out into the dining room at Stars, when I was there in the mid 80s, it was a much more homogeneous clientele for the most part. Now you go out into any dining room in San Francisco or New York or LA, you've got people from all over the world with all different backgrounds, and so there's definitely a larger or expanded audience profile to appeal to. That makes any sense.
Yeah, very much so. Much so. So over the years, you've worked with some of the best in the business, including Bernard Constantin at the Hotel Larivoire.
Larivoire, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. My French is not very good.
It's okay.
And Jean, is it Jean Brouilly?
Jean Brouilly.
In Brittany, France. And then you mentioned Bob Kincaid at the Harvest Restaurant, and Emeril Lagasse at Commander's Palace in New Orleans, and of course, Jeremiah Tower at Stars. What were the key things you learned from working with these well-known individuals?
They all had very different approaches to running their restaurants and different personalities for sure.
Yes.
And the crews that I work with, I was a small cog in each of those places. And I was very young still. I think I was 20 when I was in France, 21 when I was or 22 with Emeril, and it was 22, 23 when I was with Jeremiah, and now I'm 60. So, but back then I think that they each had a different approach towards how we think about cooking, how we think about, working with others, and each restaurant had a different sort of way that they put service on. And so I just learned, and this kind of came through on my cooking show, when people would come on and say, this is how you do this. And I'm like, actually, no, there's like 17 different ways to do everything. Right. So what I learned was keep an open mind. The chef's way is the way to do it. Unless you definitely have a better way to do it and you have an opportunity to show that chef how to do it differently and you think it's better, just keep it to yourself, do it their way, because you don't know how that will back into something else that's happening. So you see this much of it where the chef sees this much of it. So I learned pretty early on that, keep an open mind. If this is how they want the chicken cut up, this is how you cut up the chicken. If this is how they want the station set up, this is how you set up the station. If this is how you're going to call out the orders, this is how you do it. And so I learned that every chef has a certain style that's comfortable for them to operate. But as far as techniques, each one of them had a different kind of approach to cooking that was kind of something that was specific to them. I don't remember quite specifically Jean Brouilly, because that was my first restaurant job in France, and I was just overwhelmed with just not understanding 90% of what was being said in the kitchen in the beginning, and just really just trying to keep up every day. But at the Harvest with Bob Kincaid, we did a new menu every day. So we would come in, and our first task was to take inventory. So we would go into the walk-in or into our station, and we would write what's left over from yesterday. What do we have? What came in that day? We would see, oh, there's a case of Japanese eggplant. We've got a case of snow peas. I see there's a big, huge bushel of basil there, whatever. And we would write that down, and we'd look at yesterday's menu, and we would see, okay, we have enough to run this same dish. Okay, this is out, this is out. So I need to fill these two. And then we would sit down as a team with Bob sitting at the head, and he said, okay, what's your idea for a salad with a protein today? And we would start just ideating together. And we do that for about a half an hour. The 4 different stations would then come up with their menus. Then we had about an hour and a half, 2 hours at the most, to get our mise en place together. And then we were open for service. And we did that every day. And the amount of his guidance was varying each day. If somebody came, I've got this lobster and blueberry, and he was like, no lobster and blueberries. There were certain things that were just wrong. Otherwise, he'd be like, okay, that's interesting. Get that right away, and let me taste that, and then we'll go from there. So it was a super creative opportunity, one that I have never came across before, but it was incredibly impactful, and it made me think about how ingredients are really sort of flavor frequencies. He didn't say it that way, but that's how I kind of processed it. As a musician, ingredients are certain notes, right? So I look at composing a dish or a component, whether it be a sauce or vinaigrette or a soup or even a whole dish, as creating a full tone, bass, mid-range, and treble, right? So a soup would be, the base of a soup would be the stock. The mid-range would be the vegetables and some of the aromatics. And then the treble would be the salt and acid. And if all of those were balanced, it would be a delicious soup. If you used water instead of stock, it'd have no base. It would be really thin. If you had no treble with no acid or no salt, it would be really flat and muddy. So, different ingredients, whether it be bell pepper or cucumber or whatever, those are playing certain roles in the flavor frequency. So that enabled me to think about, okay, I have these 7 ingredients. How can I put it together to make something that's going to be delicious and attractive? So that was a huge kind of learning opportunity for me. And then Stars, that also the same thing. So every day at Stars, we would have a new menu, but Jeremiah would write the menu. We would contribute some ideas, and or Mark Franz, the chef at the time, but it wasn't completely from us. But we had a lot of input, and it was very different style of food. Some of the things were kind of interesting, like their color was much more of an important role at Stars than it was at the Harvest, where he would look at it and go, okay, it needs red. Okay, what flavor is red? It's like, oh, red bell pepper, red tomato, red radish. It's like, because his aesthetic was also very visual, and which at the time I was like, that's weird. But then I came to appreciate that, and now I find myself doing that as well, but I never sacrifice flavor for color. Or, presentation is super important, but, first and foremost, it's gotta be balanced and delicious. But in the middle of those three restaurants you mentioned, Emeril Lagasse, that was a restaurant that had its, menu set. And that was more about how do you feed 700 people in 3.5 hours during the peak time. And that was in a kitchen that was constantly under duress because it was just a pressure cooker of a kitchen. And there was a lot of turnover because there was a lot of people coming and going. Most people, worked there for a year or so. The upper people were there forever. Those were the lifers, but it was a churn and burn kind of thing. But I was there, I think the first or maybe second season that Emeril was the chef there. So he was 28 at the time, I think. So he was kind of new. And Ella Brennan used to sit in a bar stool right in front of my grill station and just like watch me. Never like chatted with me. She would say hi or whatever, but just watch everything I did. And that was, certain nights was very unnerving. But I just learned that you've got to work fast and you've got to work clean and you got to be able to work under pressure.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, you seem like a very versatile person and with a personality that is incredibly positive. And I know
not for everybody, I can tell you that.
Okay, well, at least from my perspective and what you're saying and all the diverse, challenging people that you've worked with, because I know from my own personal experience, working in restaurants that you deal with some personalities that aren't, let's say, real desirable. And I know when you get the upper echelon of the chef ranks, there's a lot of ego and people are very adamant about, their way or the highway.
Right.
But you seem to be, extremely open and have a very outgoing, just optimistic outlook, at least from my perspective here. Because I haven't viewed you in the kitchen, but I just think from the way you're talking, it's just apparent that you've got a very unique personality and much more versatile than a lot of these high-powered chefs that I've encountered over the years.
Well, one, I'm not a high-powered chef, so
Well, I don't know. Some people think you are.
No, I'm just I'm a passionate cook. I I don't think I could have ever been a Michelin star chef. I just don't have that kind of drive or patience where the food, I mean, for me, the food is a way to make the customer happy and it's gotta be joyful. And when the food trumps the happiness of the kitchen for the sake of obtaining a Michelin star, I've worked around people like that, and it's just it's not fun. It's
they're a little neurotic. Is that it?
yeah, and it also becomes somewhat kind of not for me it seems I don't take the food that seriously or myself seriously. I take my craft seriously and I take my job as a chef seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously. And at the end of the day, it's food, and I don't mean to belittle. I mean, I have so much respect for so many of the great chefs like Thomas Keller, Daniel Boulud, Dominique Cran, and all these people who are really very accomplished and talented. But for me, I look for creating an environment where my kitchen staff, like right now, my team at Hazy's, for the most part, none of them were line cooks before. They started with me, these either prep cooks or dishwashers, and they've come up over the last 2 years and now are doing beautiful work. I think we make great food. We get great reviews, and these guys and women feel like they're learning and they're doing a lot better off than they were before, and they're feeling they're working in an environment that is supporting them and training them. And while I could be doing more sort of advanced food if I had a more sort of sophisticated, professional, classically trained chefs on my brigade.
Okay.
But that's not what
That's not your shtick. Yeah, I
that's
got
not
it.
my shtick at the
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah, I got it. No,
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I hear you.
yeah.
And that's sort of a good segue to the next question, because in addition to being a chef, you've also been a partner in several well-known restaurants. You know, you started as a partner in Miss Pearl's Jam House in the Phoenix
Right.
Hotel in San Francisco in 1989. And then you were a partner in Tiku's French Creperie in San Francisco in 91. And then a partner in the Wild Hare restaurant in Menlo Park from 99 to 2003. So what were the added challenges of being involved in the ownership versus being a chef without having any ownership interest in the business? What was that perspective change like for you?
Well, if you ask any chef who opens their own restaurant, be careful what you wish for, you may get it.
Yeah,
Or insanity is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome.
right.
That's multiple restaurateurs like, oh, the next one will make money, the next one will be good, but it was definitely very satisfying to have ownership stake in Miss Pearl's Jam House. I felt, it gave me a different sense of responsibility and pride. But it also came with, responsibility that I didn't have before that, when, you're sitting down with your partners and you're looking at a spreadsheet and P&L, and you have to answer to certain things that you never had to answer to before. So, that was definitely a very big step in my development and my sort of attitude towards what I do, being more mature about it, realizing it's not just a restaurant, it's a business. And so if you really love your restaurant, it needs to be successful as a business so it could sustain. Unfortunately, we had, the earthquake very shortly after we opened. I think 9 months after we opened, we had the Loma Prieta earthquake.
Yeah,
That
was in 89, wasn't it?
89, yeah. We
Yeah.
opened, in 89, in October 17th
Right.
at 5:04 or 5:07, 1989. I kind of
Right.
remember it. I
Right.
was sitting in the bar with one of my partners, and another partner's niece was in the swimming pool in the courtyard of the Phoenix Hotel. And I just remember watching the waves crest over the edge of the swimming pool like this.
Oh my
And she was
goodness.
like, wee, wee. And I was like, and I ran into my kitchen realizing what was going on, and I started screaming, everybody out, everybody, and everybody was already gone.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was just really, it was very bizarre. So we were closed for 2 weeks because of that. And then when we got back open, as just like COVID kind of thing, it was like a slow coming back to life. So we lost a lot of momentum. We came out of the gate super strong. Rob Morris, an Examiner columnist, basically said I was the next coming. Watch out, Wolfgang Puck and Jeremiah Tower. Here comes Joey Altman, blah blah blah. Which was like, I was so freaked out about that because like, no, don't think that I was not ready for that kind of press. But that definitely kind of put me out there, got the restaurant really busy, and then we had the earthquake. So then it was sort of a slow rebuild after that. And then the other two partners kind of fell apart. So then it was just Chip Connolly and I, and he was not a restaurant person. And at the same time, my wife and I opened Tiku's in the Mission. So I was sort of dividing my time. And then after a while, I felt like Miss Pearl's was just, I had done everything I wanted to do there, and I wanted to do something more on my own, and not part of the hotel. So that's when I got fully involved with Tiku's. And then unfortunately, as marriages go, that kind of went south after about a year and a half. And then I went to the South Bay just to sort of start anew. And that's when I met some of my new soon to be partners in Wild Hare. So I did a consulting project, was a chef at a nightclub restaurant that was pretty successful. and it was right at the beginning of the big .com buildup. So we did like the Netscape IPO launch. We did Red Hat, Silicon Graphics. So like all the people who were at the beginning of the Silicon Valley, the .com boom, the first one, were all regular clients and then became investors in Wild Hair. And then as the .com went up, the .com went down. So we had a good 3 years, and then I got out of Silicon Valley and came back up to the city and just, again, had to reinvent. But at that time, I just started doing the Bay Cafe television show.
Yes.
And I was also working with Diageo Chateau and Estates. So I didn't have to find a restaurant job. I was able to do my cooking on the TV show, as well as doing cooking and hospitality stuff with the wine group. So I was sort of like the chef spokesperson for like 7 different wineries, and I got to do all these events and travel around the country. So I was living it was a great life, and that lasted almost 10 years.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Just to play on that a little bit more, your consulting experience, as you mentioned, it included being a spokesman for Diageo Chateau and Estate Wines, working with the Tommy Bahama Group, opening an award-winning restaurant in Mumbai, India, with your cousin chef Alex Sanchez, to becoming the culinary director for George Chen to open San Francisco's largest Chinese restaurant, China Live. So how did
I was the culinary operations director.
Culinary operations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, yeah. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish your question.
So explain to us what that means, culinary operations director.
Basically, George had his idea of the menu, and how he wanted the food to look, and how he wanted the menu to, be with 3 different kitchens, or 4 really. So we had a Western kitchen in the middle of the restaurant. We had a barbecue station, and then we had which was like the Peking ducks and the char siu pork, and then we had a corral-shaped dim sum station, and then we also had like a salad, like a hybrid station, which was used to do various specials, or like we had an oyster bar at some point, and then some other things. We would use that small area as sort of like a trial balloon area, like to see what else we can do. And we had Mandarin speaking chefs, we had Cantonese speaking chefs, we had Spanish only speaking chefs, and we actually had a couple of people who didn't speak at all. So no, true. So I had over
how big a staff was there?
I was going to say probably around 60 people. So
60 back of the house people?
Yeah, because we were open, lunch and dinner and all of those stations. And then we had a dim sum kitchen that was probably 10 people just to the dim sum people.
Wow.
And they just did production. So my job was to, from the beginning, work with the designers and the contractor to build out the kitchen, putting the equipment where it needed to be, sourcing the right equipment, small wares, figuring out how all of the menu ideas that George wanted on the menu, how they can get produced in a way that would have flow and logistically make sense in the space that we had. So, and I had to work with each of the Chinese chefs. What do you need? And source those pieces of equipment or ingredients, and then find people to support them. Because we had one guy who came out from Taiwan, another dim sum chef came from another dim sum restaurant, but didn't have people, so we had to find people for them. And so it was about 9 months of kind of putting this jigsaw puzzle together. And then once we were open, I was sort of just running around making sure everybody had what they needed, and I would just whatever was missing, I would fill in and do, whether it be prep or whatever, shopping, so that was kind of my role. Yeah.
Sure.
And so then I did, what we also had the marketplace in one side of the restaurant. So at one point we activated that with cooking demonstrations. So I would do cooking demonstrations on the weekends there. 2 or 3 times a day, these hour-long demos to sort of promote the products that we were selling in the market.
Wow. So with these diverse experiences that you've had from chefing, from being in ownership, from being a consultant, which of those three have you enjoyed the most or give you the most satisfaction? Chefing, consulting versus ownership.
They're all so different. I think chefing for sure. I think just because, as a chef, like right now, being the chef of Hazy's in Hayes Valley, I have my crew that I, trained and mentored, and part of this small group of people that every day go in and we execute our menu, and it's food that came from my head to the page to the plate, which is very satisfying. But with that is a lot of stress and pressure. Consulting was super fun, getting to travel around, working with other people, kind of basically being the gilder of a lily, basically. So like Tommy Bahamas, they had a great concept. They have a great chef who's been with them for over 20 something years, Don Donnelly. And my role with that company was basically to take my Miss Pearl's Jam House experience and kind of share that with the chef there, sort of help them just expand their Caribbean-esque kind of flair to their menu, and just basically work with the chef to facilitate more ideas and inject some fresh ideas to what they were already doing. And what they were doing was also really done well. And just basically, I was brought in to support the chef that they had, which was great. I learned a lot from them, and it was great being able to contribute something to such a great organization, and very proud of that. And I had 50% off of Bahama clothing for that time being, so that was good. Though my wife doesn't like the clothes, so I have to wear them when I'm not with her. But I like it. It's nice. Anyway, so each of those projects, were very interesting in different ways. But I have to say, being a chef of a restaurant, even if it's not my restaurant, having my team, my crew is definitely probably the most satisfying. And also being able to walk in the dining room and speak with and meet my guests and clients in the dining room. That's probably my favorite part. Like, I'll be in the dining room, walk around, how is everything? And I'll start chatting, and I'll sit down and they'll engage with me, and they'll apologize. I'm so sorry for keeping you. I'm like, no, this is my favorite part of what I do.
Yeah.
If I didn't want to be with you chatting, I'd be back in the kitchen. Because for me, it's like if I'm not making people happy, then it might as well be a grab and go. It's like, I think so much of the experience of when people go out to dinner or lunch or whatever meal, it's not just the food, it's the experience. I always tell my staff in front of the house, back of the house, people will never remember what they ate, what they drank. They will remember how they felt when they left.
Yes.
And so I see my role as a restaurant chef, be any part of a restaurant, to do whatever I can to make sure that when people leave, that they leave with a feeling of like, I'm so happy I went there.
Yes.
Whether it be the food, the hospitality, the great conversation, whatever, all of it makes up part of that experience. So.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you have so much passion, enthusiasm, excitement, and commitment to what you do in the industry, and being, the chef, the outstanding chef that you are. Do you see these kind of qualities in the new generation of chefs that you're working with today? Do you see?
Oh, for sure. Some of the,
Really?
yeah, no, I've been to some restaurants where I see some young chefs who get it, who I see, a lot of, what I consider the important values and sort of ideas about what it means to be a host chef. Yeah, no, for sure.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, there's some where I would like to pull them aside and go, hey, it's not just about you, or it's just food, dude. But no, I think there's a lot of passionate young people who enjoy what they're doing and are also, get hospitality, which is
Oh, that's cool.
yeah,
And
for
they have the
sure.
same degree of work ethic. A lot of these new generational people
Oh,
that the old school have.
no,
No, I don't think so.
no, I don't. I mean, again, I don't want to sound like, the boomer that I'm accused of being, but I talk about this all the time with my chef friends who are around my age. There's a certain, and it's understandable that of all of the things that have come out over the years, from whether it be Me Too or people, wage theft, young people today, and young people as anybody under 30, will not show up early unpaid, stay late unpaid. They have no problem, asking for a weekend off to go to Coachella,
Yeah.
even though, we've got a big event. There's nobody's coming in on their free time to learn how to do charcuterie, or coming on their free time to learn how to, fillet fish.
Sure.
Which I did, it's like, wasn't my shift, but the day that all the fish came out, I wanted to learn how to do it. I came in and did it for free.
Right. Of course.
That was the opportunity that I had.
Yeah.
That's not there.
Yeah.
Granted, San Francisco is a place where you can't really afford to do any work for free.
Yes.
Because, literally every person in hourly employee in my restaurant, I'm sure it's very similar to every other restaurant for the most part, has two jobs. So they're either working from 8 or 9 to 2 or 3, and then racing off to their night job. And so it's really challenging for people to get a staff that could do a 10-hour thing. You can't really keep people more than 6 hours now, because they have to get to their next job, because that's what it takes to afford to live in San Francisco, is to have 2 jobs. So that is a huge change in the dynamic of managing and building a team in San Francisco.
Sure. I got it. Yeah, I got it. Makes sense.
In my genre of restaurant.
Yes.
I don't know how it works for, say, Michelin star restaurants, where, maybe they can afford to pay people more, or maybe they don't have to pay people more because people are using that as a stepping stone to their own, if you work at Quince, you can, write your own ticket afterwards. So you can get people, or the French Laundry, where people will work for minimum wage, 12 hours a day, because they know after a year they can go wherever and raise money. Yeah.
Sure. Got it. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about your television career, which has really been incredible. I mean, I would assume you've, over the years, with all the episodes that you've done, you've probably reached millions, literally millions of people. You've had hundreds of guest chefs. And how were you discovered? How did you get involved in the
It was
in
at the time there wasn't Food Network in the Bay Area at the time. Food Network was just in New York. And so at the time we had Narcy David on Channel 2. We had on what was it? Maybe Channel 7 had the afternoon, guest chef would come on and do a 5-minute whatever for certain events, or but Narcy David pretty much had the morning culinary thing, and he would have a cavalcade of chefs that would come on and do demos. And then Bay TV was started in 1988 when they acquired this cable channel, and it was a news cycle. It was like they would take all the Cron news and just kind of recycle that on Channel 35. And then they hired a woman named Jeanette Gittler to create programming. And one of the programs that she wanted was a cooking show. And so they saw me on the morning news show and asked me if I wanted to be part of a new cooking show. So I would go on once a month to Cron, and I'm getting a little. So I did Narcy David. they saw me on Narcy David, asked me to come onto the Cron News morning program. Once a month, I would do a cooking demo. And then they created Bay Cafe with the idea of having a chef and Michael Bauer. And Michael Bauer at the time was doing his shadow reviews on Thursday nights. And they said, you and Michael Bauer would kind of co-host this cooking show. And I was like, thank you so much, but no, I can't, separation of church and state. I still have a restaurant and he's the main reviewer. And it would be really awkward.
Yeah, tell the audience who
Michael Bauer.
Tell them who he was, because
he was the preeminent.
He was a legend in our times.
He still kind of is. He was a preeminent food critic for the San Francisco Chronicle,
right? And
his review could make or break a restaurant.
Sure.
And I've seen him take down great chefs, and I think this is the sort of the modus operandi of most critics is you have two missions: either discover the unknown talent and be the one who delivers them to the zeitgeist, or take somebody who's a made person and tell everybody why that person doesn't deserve to have the reputation that they have, bring something down. So those are because if you're just going out like, this great chef is great, that's like, okay, tell us something we don't know, or this place is just okay, that's not interesting. So those are the two things. And Michael Bauer was amazing at both, how he wrote and how he was able to, really engage the reader and make them have strong feelings either way was very effective. And so I was kind of, there were most people in my, most chefs were leery of getting close to Michael Bauer. So I didn't, I kind of said, thank you, no, thank you. And then I don't know how long it was, but they came back to me and said, so he's going to still do his thing. We'd like to give you this opportunity to launch this show, Bay Cafe. They gave me a producer. They didn't know what the format was going to be. So this producer and I just kind of came up with our own format, like a magazine format, where I would, introduce the show with a guest chef, and then the guest chef would go away and I would do my own thing. And then we would go up and do another segment that maybe had something or not anything to do with that. And then we would do a closing short segment. So it was like a 4 segment because we had built-in commercial slots that we had to take, into consideration. And we tried also, we did some really cheesy bits. We did, it was literally making it up as we went along. And it wasn't until, probably the 3rd season where we kind of found our groove, what kind of felt natural for me, felt natural for the production, and also the audience. So the audience could know what to expect. And we didn't want it to be too serious and like a dump and stir teaching class. We definitely wanted my personality to come out. We wanted the personality, most important, we wanted the personality of the chef to come out and celebrate the chef and celebrate the diversity of the Bay Area's culinary scene, from, the Michelin star chefs to the Romanian grandmother who has this amazing, goulash recipe that everybody should be cooking. So we had guests on there that weren't in the restaurant business, that were friends of friends of friends who just were, great characters. And we figured out how to bring them in. And so it was, anyway, so I was discovered by doing this small, bits on the news shows that caught the eye of this main producer. I think it was my Halloween show where I was doing these really ghoulish appetizers for Halloween, where I made night crawlers out of ahi tuna and took wasabi oil and made it look like goo, and then made ghost shapes out of wontons. And so they thought that was pretty clever, and that's how I got my job.
Cool. So with all these great TV shows that you were involved in, what was the highlight of your TV experience?
Boy, so many people. Just the whole getting to meet the number of people that I got to meet in the industry that I never would get to actually work with or get to know, because we're all sort of, siloed in our own restaurant kitchens. it just was such an incredible opportunity and reward, I guess, for lack of a better word, to get to meet and cook with John George, Daniel Boulud, and everybody in the Bay Area. And so it used to be I couldn't go out and not know the chef in the restaurant, and so it was just great being that intimate with the community that I was part of. At the same time, it was really a great honor to be able to offer something to these chefs, like this platform to promote them, which, was a great position to be in. Like when I came knocking at your door, it wasn't asking for a gift certificate or a free meal. It was like, hey, I'd like to promote you and help your restaurant. So that was always met with like, hey, Joey's here, which is always nice to hear, as opposed to Joey's here.
Yeah.
So
you were the mitzvah man in the
exactly
in the culinary world, right?
Exactly. I was
for the audience that doesn't know what mitzvah means, it means good deed. So
yeah, I was the gift that kept on giving. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
very much so.
So a number of chefs who went on to have, like Chris Cosentino and other Elizabeth Faulkner, Bay Cafe was their sort of trial balloon, or their first, time doing television, that launched their own, television careers and media careers. So it was great to.
Well, you did it. You had an incredible run, and your name is very well respected, and people talk about you all the time from the conversations I have with restaurant owners. So you really made a mark in the industry with your TV career.
It's good to know. I feel very proud of my career. It's not over.
For sure.
This industry is not one that makes it possible to retire early, like tech industry is. So, but that's okay. I'm just so blessed to still be healthy, still enjoy what I do, and still have opportunities to do what I do. And I'm always sure that the next thing I'm going to be doing, I have no idea what it is. It's everything that has been significant in my life has been a left turn out of nowhere that wasn't expecting it, but it was an opportunity that I was smart enough or stupid enough to say yes to. So hopefully some of those are still around the corner.
Sure. So what would you like your next chapter to look like?
Very lucrative. No, I don't know. I'm honestly, if there was an opportunity to do more television or media in some way, that would be great. I'm not a self like a lone wolf person to like create my own content and go on TikTok, and that to me, that's not. I would rather be called up by somebody who's got a production company, say, hey, you'd be good front man for us, or we think you're the missing wheel in this. That would be great. Sure. So if there's somebody out there that's looking for a good front man, give me a call. I'm available for that.
I will certainly keep that in mind.
Oh, okay, good.
For sure.
But as far as I still have this concept that I would love to do, that I was about to do when COVID kind of took the wind out of my sails, for my Jewish Mexican mashup restaurant. Yes. My wife is Mexican, I'm Jewish, and I came up with this concept in this beautiful space that was going to be it was basically going to be a high-end Mexican restaurant with a big, huge, expansive tequila mezcal bar. And then a friend of mine who I have regular dinners with said, I was looking for a Latino chef to be a partner with me. And because I didn't want to be accused of being a cultural appropriator, said, well, just do Jewish food. And then I thought about Jewish Mexican food. And it occurred to me that, if you take Sephardic, Jewish cooking and Latin cooking, and you did a Venn diagram, it's like this. There's so much overlay, and there's so much interesting things that you could do. And then I created this menu that just using tahini in tacos and using moles in briskets, and there's actually a huge Jewish population in Central America and Mexico cities, particularly, that I was super excited about it. And then I came up with this name Eloy, which just,
Great name.
cherry on the cake. And I was like, and then this wonderful designer, Alyssa Herman, who's Jewish Mexican, which I didn't know until I engaged her design services, came up with a logo with two llamas wearing yarmulkes, and llamas and yarmulkes needs to happen. And it was just beautiful and so cute, and just captured the whole spirit of everything I wanted to do. So hopefully my wife will let me one day take another step, execute it.
Yes, for sure. Well, I'll be a customer, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, every time
great.
I tell people about it, they get super excited and like, where is that? It's like, it's in my head right now, but we'll see.
Okay, and any restaurant investors out there in the audience, you got a great concept and a great operator here. So
Yep.
let us know. We'll be happy to hook you up. Well, Joey, I want to acknowledge you for the leadership contributions you've made to the hospitality industry. As a celebrity chef, you've reached millions of people on television, which has undoubtedly encouraged the viewers to eat out more often, which has strengthened the hospitality industry. You've trained hundreds of chefs throughout various parts of the world, and you've been a role model to all of those that have the opportunity to work with you throughout the past 4 decades. I also want to thank you very much for the informative presentation that you made today, and I want to wish you best wishes for continued success. If the audience wants to get in touch with you, anybody in the audience, what's the best way to reach you?
Joey Altman at Gmail.
Okay, Joey Altman at Gmail. Got it. So if you have any questions from the presentation today, please email me at steve@restaurantrealty.com, and I will respond to you shortly after the show. Our future remaining co-hosts for this year include Brandon Robinson, who's the CEO of Tipsy Pit, which is a Northern California multi-chain mini putt golf courses with pubs. And Brandon has a very interesting background, having been the founder of Soul Med Spa as well. Our other speaker will be Scott Greenberg. He's a former multi-unit franchisee of Edible Arrangements. He's also a keynote speaker and author of The Shift Show and The Wealthy Franchisee. And we'll be announcing our lineup of Restaurant Dealmaker co-hosts for 2025 in the near future. I want to thank you very much, Joey, for joining us today. If anybody wants to reach me, I can be reached at steve@restaurantrealty.com. And you can call me toll free at 888-995-9701. I want to close by wishing everyone to make sure they take care of yourself, take care of others, and stay well. And thank you for joining us today. And Joey, it's been a real pleasure.
Steve, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you and your partners for having me. It's been a real honor. And it sounded like my mother wrote that closing piece for me.
Awesome part.
So I really appreciate the kind words.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And best to you. Stay well.
Likewise. Best to you.
Take care.
Well, all right. Ciao.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.